Greetings, friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhno. I invite you to review the battle map as of the morning of November 14th. It's Friday, and we'll summarize the past day's events. Today's review won't be very long, as it will just be a brief overview of what's happening on different sections of the front. Let's start with Zaporizhzhia, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and write your comments. So what has happened in the Zaporizhzhia region? In the Huliaipole area, Deep State, in its latest updates, has marked the advance of the occupiers towards Solodke and in the area of Novoye-Spenivka. This is a continuation of the offensive toward the settlement of Huliaipole, which is currently under our control, but the occupiers are creating more and more reasons to put our troops here in a very ambiguous position. Unfortunately, at the moment, it can be stated that over the past 2 weeks, at least some units and formations of the enemy's 5th Combined Arms Army have managed to achieve significant success by crossing the Yancha River in this direction. The river flows right here, and it could have served as a kind of a real watershed line, but unfortunately, after the occupiers crossed it in the area of Ospenivka, you can already see here Ospenivka, Pavlivka. After crossing here, they managed to establish a rather stable and resilient bridgehead, which has actually stretched westward for about 7 kilometers. This is a situation that realistically we are probably no longer able to stop in the near future. The prospects for our troops in this direction, let's be honest, especially for Huliaipole, I mentioned this yesterday, are rather vague. These prospects are not encouraging, not favorable for the village's defense. The enemy is only increasing the pace of their advance and the pace of maneuvering their troops. Obviously, the capabilities of the Russian forces here now significantly exceed ours, and for now, this cannot be stopped. This is not the enemy. The very first thing they aim to do, and you can see this on the map, is to advance from the north and physically cut off the logistics of Huliaipole by pushing toward this road, which runs from Huliaipole through Dobropilya toward Pokrovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk region. This settlement right here, that's exactly where, well, actually, I'll just outline this line like this. It might not be very visible, but I'll roughly sketch out this route here. This is the direction toward Pokrovsk. Essentially, this is the road, the so-called Rokadna route, which the occupiers are planning to cut either at this point or at this point, physically blocking the movement and logistics between our troops in Pokrovsk and Huliaipole. The first point is right here. This is exactly the area I just described. The second area is, in fact, the side near the settlement of Danilivka. This is the village of Danilivka, which lies right on the route between Huliaipole and Pokrovsk. And as you can see, by the way, this is also a recent change, the latest update that appeared on the Deep State map related to the enemy's advance in this area. For now, this is a gray zone because the most that has been recorded in Danilivka is the flag planting by the Russian Federation. It is in this settlement, in this area, that they raised their flags and claim to have captured this settlement. For now, we cannot say for certain that this is the case, but unfortunately, flag planting lately, especially along the border of Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk, and Zaporizhzhia regions, often ends up with ultimately the occupation of the settlement takes place. That is, in the near future, we will see the enemy intensify their actions in the direction of Huliaipole Pokrovsk and along the road that connects them. The worst trend here is that the enemy has, as I've said before, a rather stable and quite powerful grouping here, which the Russians can maneuver and redeploy between the Pokrovsk or so-called Oleksandrivsk direction and the Huliaipole direction. That is, this entire stretch of the front is cracking very, very seriously for us. This is already an entry into the flank near Pokrovsk, and these are advances to the flank and even the rear of Huliaipole. All of this, so to speak, the outlook is rather vague, and this actually explains those narratives that previously existed in the statements of our military, that for us, the defense in Donbas is critically important, and under no circumstances do we have the right to lose it without a fight. Why is this defense so important? Because Donbas is a densely populated region with settlements that made it possible to create entire strongholds, defensive nodes, and to hold out for a long time against the enemy. Now, in many locations, these strongholds have been breached, including here in Donetsk region, and the borders have been crossed. As a result, more open operational spaces are appearing, where, unfortunately, the occupiers have the opportunity to advance more quickly. And at the same time, thanks to their advantage in manpower, they don't have to attack these settlements or defensive strongholds head on, like, for example, Huliaipole, but can instead bypass them, for instance, by flanking here, or approach the Pokrovsk defensive stronghold from the flanks, the settlement of Pokrovsk, not Pokrovsk, but Pokrovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk region. So, unfortunately, I honestly don't know what to do here. The president visited the Zaporizhzhia direction when he was near Orikhiv yesterday. Following the visit to the front, the head of state recorded a video message saying that the Zaporizhzhia direction will now be reinforced. How exactly? What can we do here? Maybe move some reserves. Maybe yes, but is there really anything more that can be done here? Because I don't know the answer to this question, I'm being real and objective. We move further up towards Pokrovsk. What are we observing here right now? I mentioned earlier that the visible plan of our troops is to try to gain a foothold in Mirnorad, to ease the logistics of Mirnorad from the north in Rodinske and Krasny Lyman, and to partially secure a position on the northern outskirts of Pokrovsk. What is the situation at this very moment? It is highly likely that we are in fact losing the northern outskirts of Pokrovsk. Why? Because the occupiers are establishing themselves everywhere. It is actually being confirmed that here in Rivne, they are establishing themselves. This particular spot, is the point where the landing took place. The main intelligence directorate is there now, and the shadow unit is actively sharing its videos of strikes against enemy positions. In other words, the enemy is increasingly present here, and Russian troops are, let's say, firmly establishing themselves in the western and northwestern districts of Pokrovsk. In this location, where I am now showing footage where GUR previously landed strikes, Russians are already publishing their own videos, where they have written "Glory to Russia" in paint on the asphalt. This means they had enough time to write this, to leave these inscriptions, and even to publish some messages addressed to Budanov. So, in other words, it is highly likely that even the northern districts of Pokrovsk are gradually, step by step, coming under the control of the Russian army. Although just the day before there was footage of a clearing operation by the 425th Assault Regiment Skelia in the northern part of Pokrovsk, but again these are very situational raids by our assault troops. The overall trend shows that unfortunately the enemy is gaining control over these areas more and more often and on a larger scale in the northern locations of Pokrovsk. As is being recorded, meaning the enemy, right here and in the logistics area near Rivne. As for Mirnorad and its prospects, I won't venture to say anything. Right now, our paratroopers are doing fantastic work in the defensive operation and in the operation to expose the flanks and maintaining logistics. Whether it will succeed or not, we're not here to make predictions. At the moment, there is very tough and difficult work going on in the outskirts of Pokrovsk. Although here in Rivne, there are already even some videos appearing of clearing operations and the destruction of enemy infantry. It's less about clearing operations and more about the destruction of enemy infantry. The 38th Marine Brigade has shown the relevant footage on its official channels. Obviously, the whole plan to capture at least the northern part of Pokrovsk, and along with it Mirnorad, is unlikely to be realized. I've mentioned this before, referring in particular to the analyst from the information resistance group Kostyantynivka, that when three armies are pressing against just a few of our brigades, expecting a completely positive outcome is probably not very realistic, to put it mildly. In Kostyantynivka, the enemy is also continuing to push forward, advancing into the eastern districts of this settlement, this defensive stronghold, into the eastern neighborhoods of Kostyantynivka. The 28th Mechanized Brigade, which is holding the defense here, has shown videos, actually, of clearing operations. No, again, it's not quite right to call them clearing operations. A clearing operation is when the infantry has already gone in and actually cleared out the enemy troops that managed to get in somewhere. Here, it's the bombers and the vampires at work. They are destroying enemy positions that are appearing situationally in the eastern districts of Kostyantynivka. However, for now, full-scale, let's say, battles for this settlement have not yet been realized or achieved, at least for now, begun at this point in time. But the more successful the occupiers' further operations are in the Pokrovsk direction, the sooner Russian soldiers may appear here in Kostyantynivka. There is somewhat less news from Lyman and Siversk at the moment. At least for now, it can be assumed that it has been possible to slow down, in a global sense, the enemy's advance and the work of their drone operators in this area. locations, because at the very least, the absence of bad news is already good news in the current situation, given what things are like now. Let's also look at the latest updates from the Kupiansk front. Well, first of all, the most current new development is the enemy's capture of Stepova Novoselivka, which was marked on the deep state map. This is on the left bank of Kupiansk. The defense has not collapsed. It is still holding within this extremely difficult bridgehead that we still have on the left bank of the Oskil River in this area. Our troops continue to hold the defense here. Several units of drone forces and brigades, both cheap and ground units, as well as separate battalions of ground brigades, continue to hold this location. Logistics across the Oskil River here is impossible just for crossing the Oskil, as the soldiers sometimes joke, though it's not really a joke. They say you could already be awarded a medal for simply managing it. But it's clear that holding this area allows the operation to clear Kupiansk to continue, because if this area falls, we won't be able to hold Kupiansk anymore. For now, there are still some hopes for clearing it. Even though I'm not a supporter of those statements from the president about setting real or, as he put it, specific deadlines for clearing Kupiansk, I believe that announcing such military operations, frankly, live on air is not the right information strategy. Nevertheless, the clearing of Kupiansk from enemy forces is indeed ongoing, gradually, very slowly, but it is happening. We just need to understand why it's taking so long. Again, it's not a given that it will be fully accomplished, but the reason it's taking so long, according to the commanders I've spoken with, those who are actually leading the assault units, is that, as they say, it takes at least about 3 days to clear a single 5-story building. Because it's not just about flying drones, it requires infantry on foot, risking their lives, searching for the enemy across the entire area of responsibility, clearing every basement, every building, every cellar, every shed. Basically anything that could potentially serve as a hiding place for the Russians. And in these hiding places, there could be 1, 2, or even an entire squad of occupiers. That's why these maneuvers are always extremely dangerous. All of this is compounded by the fact that the enemy relentlessly shells these areas with KABs and also monitors our airspace with their drones, just as we monitor it. And these are extremely dangerous actions. So clearing, for example, a 5-story building usually takes at least 3 days on average. That's why the advance is so slow, but nevertheless, we are still making positive progress in Kupiansk. A separate topic that I would like to raise today at the very end of the review is something I have already mentioned more than once. Thank you. I am above the Rubicon, which has significantly, let's say, changed the course of events on the front line. The Rubicon, which started targeting our pilots, which began to put pressure on our line of contact, and which in some places shifted our pilots' focus from striking the rear to paying attention to the front line. All of this leads to the thought that under our current defensive conditions, it is absolutely essential for us to gain the capability for so-called mid-strike attacks. That is, to strike enemy logistics with drones or missiles capable of covering distances of 100, 150, 200, up to 300 kilometers, thereby destroying enemy logistics. After all, it is much more important to hit a truck delivering 100 drones to the front line than to try to counter those 100 drones later. Recently, because the Rubicon guys set fires for us at the front, this work, if not completely failed, was at least done much less. Less attention was paid to it, and the focus was scattered. Accordingly, in this context of mid-range strike drones and missiles, which is encouraging, at least there have started to appear even news reports that, possibly quite likely, the Flamingo missiles have begun to be used against the so-called frontline areas. At the very least, such a video. Also, in the Zaporizhzhia region, our forces carried out actual mid-range strikes in the Berdyansk area on the forward command posts of the 5th Combined Arms Army and the 127th Motorized Rifle Division. It is worth adding in this context that the 5th Combined Arms Army is precisely the one conducting the offensive in the Huliaipole area. In addition, targets on the territory of the Russian Federation were also struck. That is, this component of medium-range strikes, these so-called middle strike missions, has improved a bit for us and is gradually developing. Not only Flamingo, but also drone missiles like Bars and Drone Liuti have been used. This was officially, in fact, reported by the General Staff. That's why I really hope that now. It's hard to talk about catching up to this parity, but at least there is an attempt to jump on this train happening right now. And let's at least try to find something positive in this. On that note, I'll put a period on today's review. Thank you, friends, for your attention. Take care of yourselves. See you next time.